Today I'm reviewing the first half of the 49ers 2022 season. We do not have an even number of games anymore, so there's no perfect halfway point. With 17 game season, it's the bye week. They have played 8 games. We figure it's close enough. My expectation going into the season was not Super Bowl. Many here in the Bay Area said Super Bowl or bust. Can we be realistic? They had a very raw starting quarterback, inexperienced quarterback in Trey Lance. My feeling was they could still make the playoffs with him as quarterback, but to expect anything to really happen and go deep in the playoffs, very unrealistic. It's already felt like a full season because so much has happened in 8 games. And going back to last year, the championship game against the Rams, it was one of the greatest missed opportunities in the franchise's history. There have been some painful losses, like any NFL franchise has had, for the 49ers over the last, we'll say, 10, 11 seasons. When I began following the team, unfortunately, it was right after their Super Bowl run. Wasn't quite old enough to take it in and appreciate it at all, really. And I began watching the team immediately after that last Super Bowl. And I could actually understand something about the game. The 49ers were the first team to have 5 Super Bowls in the sport, and that is one of the greatest all-time accomplishments. They had, to that point, the greatest run in NFL history until the Patriots. They've lost many playoff games, the Packers. They had lost championship games. Moving forward to the Harbaugh years, at least making the championship 3 years in a row with the 2011 Giants overtime NFC championship game. They lost the Super Bowl to the Ravens, which I believe they should have won. Then there's the Seahawks championship game, which was a devastating loss. You have the Super Bowl loss against the Chiefs, where you have a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. And then finally, you have last year's championship game. And I'm sure many would disagree with me. I consider this the worst loss since I've been following the 49ers. I'd put it up there with historically the 1990 championship game against the Giants. But since the Harbaugh years, let's say from the Harbaugh years on, this has no doubt been the worst loss. And for me, I would say going back to, it's the worst loss since that 1990 championship game, where the 49ers should have three-peated. It's worse because the New York Giants championship game, the 49ers should have won that game, but that whole season it went so well and it happened so quickly, and it was their first year getting in the playoffs. That's also unrealistic to just expect to go right through. Sometimes teams do it the first time, but it's rare. I understand that, so I was not as broken up about that game as some. The Ravens Super Bowl was bad in its own way because I don't feel like they showed up necessarily flat, but very tight in that game. Not that they were unprepared, but they were very tight. And they made so many mistakes. They were outcoached, and the game really wasn't even close until late in the game. It wasn't as bad as other games. The Seahawks game was also terrible because it was a rival. In some ways, it was more of a bitter loss because it was the Seahawks. You had a rivalry with them. Not a long rivalry, but they were the most physical games played in the NFL at that time, and that was the Super Bowl that year in 2013. It was. And NaVorro Bowman's career was never the same after that. So much changed. The 49ers went down after that, and they never really got back up. It ended that run they had of making it at least the championship 3 years in a row. But did we expect to win in Seattle? No. I did not think for a moment. The 49ers were up, I believe, 10-0 in that game early, and they got the best start they had in years in Seattle. At least against Russell Wilson at quarterback. I didn't think the 49ers were going to win that game because the way they were dominated in Seattle in 12 and 13. It was hard because there was back and forth. They had the early lead. I didn't think they were going to win that game. And I'm going to even take it a step further. The Chiefs Super Bowl. Super Bowl 54. They're up by 10 in the fourth quarter, and then they give it up. I felt that the game was going to go either way. I thought it was going to be a very close game, but if you had to press me, I would have favored the Chiefs because they had Mahomes. It's a quarterback's league. No matter how good you play defense, it's a quarterback's league. It was far worse to me than the Ravens Super Bowl loss. The Ravens Super Bowl loss was bad in this way that you had Joe Flacco on the other side of the field, even though it was Super Flacco who couldn't seem to make a mistake and got lucky at times in the playoffs. Some have gone so far as to say it was the greatest playoff run ever by a quarterback during that season. But it's still Joe Flacco. You're facing Patrick Mahomes, who may go down as one of the very greatest ever. So you have to weigh that, and everyone has their own opinions about which was worse. I go with the Chiefs Super Bowl. You're leading almost the entire second half, and you force them to play your game. You enforced your will on them, and you were holding them down. You did what all the other teams in the playoffs could not do against that Chiefs offense. But it didn't surprise me that the 49ers offense couldn't do anything. It didn't surprise me that the 49ers defense finally cracked. It was too much to ask. What was surprising was how quickly it all fell apart. That's what was terrible about the loss, and stays with you. The Rams championship game, to me, is the worst loss because this was a team you dominated. You won 6 straight, and not every single game was one-sided. No, they weren't, but you had their number. It was not on the grandest stage. It was not the Super Bowl, but they'd already beaten the Bengals, and it was a close game too. It was an overtime game. They did beat the Bengals, and they were going against a team that they were clearly superior to when it came to talent, if they were to go on and face the Bengals. Although they were on the road, in many ways, it was a neutral, if not a home field advantage for the 49ers going down to Los Angeles. So there was, if anything, they had an advantage over the Rams. Once again, they are up by 10 going into the fourth quarter, and the problem was the offense couldn't do anything. This is an offensively, you cannot expect a defense to shut an opponent down for a whole game. I think Matthew Stafford is an above average quarterback, but that's at his best. But that's as far as I would go. Cooper Kupp had an all-time great season last year. You're not going to keep them off the scoreboard. The offense could not get it done. They could not put the Rams away. There was the ball that should have been intercepted by Tart. Yeah, we know that. But I blame the game more on the offense than the defense. That didn't necessarily seal, that would not have sealed the game. They would still have to stop the Rams, and they would still have to do something on offense. They could not put the Rams away once and for all. Unlike those other losses, when I saw the Rams celebrating their championship, a conference championship, I was more upset over this than even the Super Bowl losses. I said 49ers should be up there celebrating, not the Rams. This is the team that they've owned. This is the team that they were up on. This is the team that, when I look at the all-around rosters, is better. But the Rams had the better quarterback. Aaron Donald took over at the end and the pass rush, and Von Miller came on, and Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't do well at end the games in pressure on the greatest stage. He doesn't. There's a reason why Kyle Shanahan doesn't trust him. You go back to the Chiefs Super Bowl, and then it was like watching a replay of the Super Bowl in so many ways. To me, it was like reliving the Super Bowl. That you were up by 10 in the fourth quarter, and your offense couldn't do anything. And the defense didn't fall apart. You know, the defense did not completely fall apart in the Chiefs Super Bowl either. It was bad, but in this game, they gave up 13 points. That's not a disaster on the road. Your offense couldn't score 3 points when they needed to. It's too much to ask for. All right, well, getting into this season. I'm just going to go through these games quickly, one by one. This is not going to be in depth. Just make some comments as we go. Week 1 in Chicago. And then you have the first home game in Seattle. Could you have an easier start to the schedule? You'd think you couldn't. This was Trey Lance's first game as the number 1 starter. And he was the starter for the season. It wasn't because Garoppolo was hurt. He was the guy. And we felt good coming into this game, except at the end of the week, I was looking at the weather forecast and I saw that rain was scheduled for Sunday. And then as we got closer and closer, it wasn't just going to be rain, it was going to be heavy rain. And when that happens, you know, anything can happen. And in week 1, when bad teams don't know they're bad, strange things happen. Week 1. Bad teams can knock off good teams. And then when you throw in that you're on the road, you throw in that it's going to be a messy field and you have an extremely inexperienced quarterback, could be a recipe for disaster. Once again, the problem with this game was the 49ers had opportunities and had opportunities early, before the conditions really got bad, to end the game. Put the Bears away, make it so far out of reach that there's no way the Bears could have won. Trey Lance was inconsistent, as expected. There were plays in this one that I said several times, there's no way Jimmy Garoppolo's making that pass. There was sloppy play. Deebo Samuel had a fumble early in the game. The defense was brilliant in the first half. In the second half, when it got sloppier and messier, especially at the end of the game, there were some broken plays, and they had some defensive breakdowns. Again, I want to say, even against a bad team in the modern NFL, you can't expect to completely shut down a team when you're on the road. The defense and both sides of the ball did not make adjustments in the second half. The Bears did. And the worst part of that was Dante Pettis on that broken play. And you have to deal with a mobile quarterback. And the 49ers struggle with mobile quarterbacks. And you had Justin Fields make a few plays. And it was Justin Fields versus Trey Lance. And I thought the 49ers were going to pick Justin Fields over Trey Lance, and they chose Trey Lance. So in some ways, it was the Bears saying this was a revenge game for Justin Fields, and then Dante Pettis getting the long touchdown on a broken play. But there's still poor excuses. Poor excuses for losing this week 1 game. The weather really did not make it unplayable until the fourth quarter. They had 3 quarters to win the football game, and they lost the second half. They especially lost the third quarter. And then they lost Elijah Mitchell. He hasn't played yet. He's about to come back. But he's missed weeks 2 through 7, or 2 through 8. And that's a major theme of the season so far, is injuries. So they drop to 0-1. And I'm willing to let that go because crazy things happen sometimes in week 1, and then you throw in the weather, young quarterback. Okay, we'll let that go. Week 2 against the Seahawks. Well, we'll remember this as the game where Trey Lance got injured. They're back home, and it's actually a wet game in San Francisco. When was the last time we had a wet game with some rain early in the season in San Francisco? I can't remember. And the 2 first games of the season had rain. This was light rain, though. That's what was good. It really didn't affect the game. It was a wet field. Didn't affect throwing. But early in the game, Trey Lance has a run, and he gets crushed, and he's out for the season. It was also like watching him in Arizona last season. These designed runs, it's not that he's going off the sideline. No, he's going right into the defense. And we even saw that in the Bears game, saying, if they keep doing that, he's going to get hurt, especially in the rain. And at the start of this game, it happens. And it doesn't look good, and we find out he's out for the season. The 49ers go on to dominate, though, the rest of the game. And they've done what they haven't done to the Seahawks. since Pete Carroll's been the head coach. They win a one-sided game 27-7 at home, and Jimmy Garoppolo comes in and he looks good. They look really sharp on both sides of the ball. And they go to 1-1. And I should say they lost to the Bears 19-10. They defeat the Seahawks in the home over 27-7. Then we go to Denver for Sunday Night Football. Sunday Night Football on NBC. This was one of the worst games I've ever watched. Not that it was humiliating or embarrassing or it was a blowout. It was ugly on both sides of the field. The Broncos played terribly. The 49ers started off well, and then the offense couldn't do anything really for the rest of the game. Jimmy Garoppolo had an awful game. I think we'll all remember the safety where, not that he got sacked, he stepped out of bounds in the back of the end zone, and then when he actually threw the ball, it would have been a pick six. That was one of the worst quarterback plays I've ever seen. And thankfully, he did already step out of bounds, which I'd never seen a quarterback step out of the back of the end zone for a safety, because at least he only gave up 2 points instead of 6. It would have been 7. I blame the offense and the coaching in this game more than anything. The defense didn't surrender a touchdown until the fourth quarter. I mean, overall, the defense was great in the first 3 games. It was a really bad second half, and there were broken plays. More really just a bad quarter in Chicago. That was such a winnable game, and they find a way to lose to Russell Wilson again. Russell Wilson, one of the great 49er killers of all time. He only had one good possession, really, for the whole game. And they managed to lose 11-10. And two, at this point of the season, the injuries are stacking up already. And we'll get to those injuries more at the end. To week 4, when the 49ers need to get well, they face the Rams. And this was Monday Night Football, Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. Defense was excellent. Nick Bosa was harassing Stafford all game. The defensive line won the day. They won in the trenches like they usually do. And on offense, Jimmy Garoppolo was good. Give him credit. He was good in this game. He could have thrown a pick, as he usually does. There's always, at some point, just about every game, he's about to throw a terrible interception. Deebo Samuel was the star. I mean, the play he made to snatch that ball out of the air and the yards after the catch, this was his best game of the season so far. And then the Hufanga interception to essentially end the game in the fourth quarter. Amazing play. Carolina Panthers at Carolina. Strange because it was a 1 p.m. game here on the West Coast. It was 4 there. And it was also on CBS. And this happens more than it used to be. For years, you wouldn't see an NFC game on CBS. It'd automatically be a Fox game. Very unusual. It would happen every once in a while, but it was a strange game. They got Ian Eagle. I like Ian Eagle as the play-by-play. I'm surprised they got their number 2 crew to do it because Panthers are a bad football team. If 49ers controlled most of this game, I don't have a lot to say, but more injuries. that was maybe the worst thing that came out. It's great they got a road win. You take road wins whenever you can get them. But Nick Bosa went out with an injury, and then they lost Emmanuel Mosley for the season. So it was great that they won 37-15, but more injuries. Bittersweet. And this was also a rare game where the 49ers were the home red, on the road. We've noticed that when they have an opportunity to wear home on the road, somehow it usually doesn't work out. Except, well, if it's the Cowboys. Even though I can think of a historic game where they didn't. Okay, the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. This was one of the games on the schedule you said automatic win. And I don't usually say automatic win because any given Sunday is true. We've already seen it with the Bears. At the start of the year, I was putting this down. I thought the Falcons were one of the worst teams in the league. But I didn't know what to think at this point with all the injuries on defense. They were down Nick Bosa, they were down Eric Armstead, they were down Kinlaw. They were out without 3 starting defensive linemen and then their number 2 corner. And if I'm not mistaken, at least 1 starting linebacker. They were really banged up. And Marcus Mariota was very good in this game. He did not throw an incompletion until the 4th quarter. The defense just didn't make adjustments. I know they were shorthanded. Well, I also don't blame the defense in this game. The offense was healthy. 49ers had a healthy offense in Atlanta, and they couldn't get it done. They could not put points on the board in the second half. They had a 8-minute drive where they could not score. They didn't even come up with points. An 8-minute drive in the 4th quarter, and they couldn't even produce points. I mean, no hurry-up offense at all. I did enjoy that the roof was open for this game. That's about the only thing I enjoyed. So the 49ers lose. Week 7, 49ers and Chiefs. The rematch in San Francisco. We've been looking for this game and waiting for this game for a long time. But it wasn't what we'd hoped it would have been. Well, one, I did not want to see Jimmy Garoppolo go up against the Chiefs again. 2, injuries all over. And the 49ers were rushing multiple players back who I don't think were ready to come back. On offense, Trent Williams, he was not ready in this game, and he got beat bad several times. They rushed him back when they shouldn't have. On defense, I think they rushed Nick Bosa back and Ward. They got off to a great start. They got off to a lead in the first quarter, and Hufanga came up with another interception off Patrick Mahomes. And then the Chiefs just turned it on after that. And the 49ers couldn't keep up. They didn't make defensive adjustments. They got whatever they wanted when they got it, when they wanted it. They could not stop Mahomes. He had arguably his best game of the season. I know he threw a bunch of touchdowns in week 1, but I guess against the Cardinals. This was, in my opinion, his best game of the season so far. And they were outcoached. They were outplayed. This is what I fear the Super Bowl would have been. 44-23 at home. On the uniform front, the 49ers decided to wear the turnbacks. That's what added to the embarrassment. They wore the 94 Super Bowl uniforms, and they got embarrassed wearing them. I don't want to see, unless you have a great quarterback, unless you have a team that is more like the Chiefs, don't wear those 94. It's just, don't wear the 94 uniforms. You just disgrace them. Steve Young, Jerry Rice, Ricky Watters, Bryant Young, Deion Sanders, on and on and on. That team, one of the greatest 49er teams. So they dropped to 3-4. And when the 49ers need to get right, once again, they have the Rams on the schedule. We wish they had the Rams on the schedule 4 times. 4 times? 6 times? 8 times? They played the Rams during the season in Los Angeles, because you know when it's in Los Angeles, it's not an away game. It's almost a home game. Damon Bruce calls it fancy candlestick. South, I think that's what he calls it. The end zones are just full of red there, and that's how it was. The Rams, though, got off to a quick start in this one. The 49ers weren't doing on offense. They didn't have any answers for stopping the Rams, and it looked like this game was going to take a different turn. This game was going to be a different outcome than what they had in other seasons. That the Rams may actually win this game. At halftime, this was the Rams game. And I didn't mention it, but right before the 49ers faced the Chiefs, they made the trade that we thought might happen for Christian McCaffrey. And they gave a lot for him. And they gave a lot for a running back who has injury problems. I was not in favor of the trade because the 49ers know how to just plug running backs in their system, and they make it work. And you know McCaffrey, when he's on the field, he's great, but how long will he be on the field? I was not in favor of it. He didn't play much in the Chiefs game, but in this game, it will be remembered as the Christian McCaffrey game. This was the game he took over. He threw for a touchdown, he caught a touchdown, and he ran for a touchdown. Only done by 2 players in NFL history at running back. Walter Payton and LaDainian Tomlinson, 2 of the all-time greats, great running backs. Jimmy Garoppolo had a good game. Give it up to him. He had a couple plays, as he always does, that could have been interceptions, probably should have been interceptions. But he had one of his better games. The offensive line was good. They contained Aaron Donald for the most part. The Rams really missed Von Miller. They missed Von Miller in both of these games. And the thing that frustrates me about the 49ers lost to the Rams last year, and the Rams, there's no doubt they're a talented team, but they're so top-heavy. And where the 49ers are good is they have depth, and they should be able to expose that more. What also changed in this game was second half, the defense clamped down and they surrendered nothing. They shut the Rams down and they made the adjustments actually on both sides of the ball that they failed to make in so many seasons now with Shanahan. They got after Stafford. They limited Cooper Kupp. They just out-physicaled them. I mean, they just played the physical game and enforced their will against the finesse Rams. And it was a great win. It was one of the greatest regular season wins in a long time. I'd put it up there among the very best regular season wins under Kyle Shanahan. and we stuck it to the Rams, and they did what they did not do in the championship game. They did what they could not do against the Chiefs. The great frustration with the 49ers is they don't put teams away. They get to a certain score, they get to a 10-point lead, and they just hand off, ultra conservative. They opened it up and kept their foot on the gas for once. And look what happened. They win 31-14, and they sweep the Rams again in the regular season. One of the most impressive wins, and yes, the star of the game was McCaffrey, and we'll see how it turns out with McCaffrey. It all depends if he can stay healthy. And they decided with this trade to go all in. They went all in on this season. But what happens with this season? Okay, they're 4-4 now. And if they play as they do, they should certainly be a playoff team. I don't believe in the Seahawks as a division winner. I'm not sold on them. But the whole thing about the 49ers is they're inconsistent because they have an inconsistent quarterback. Can Christian McCaffrey help? He can. And what I also want to point out, though, what was so impressive about this Rams win was all the injuries. No Deebo Samuel. No Kyle Juszczyk. No Eric Armstead. No Javon Kinlaw. No Dre Greenlaw. No Al Shahir. And no Ward. So they're out 5 starters on defense, 5 starters on defense, and 7 starters altogether, and they defeat the Rams soundly. But can the 49ers be consistent in the second half? Can you have that better Jimmy Garoppolo? You know what you're going to get with him, but can you get that better version of him? And does McCaffrey now make Garoppolo's job easier? They have the most just skilled offensive players in the league. Deebo Samuel, he's not having the season he did last year, but Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. Who has a better supporting cast than that? I mean, Garoppolo should play the best he's ever had with those guys as long as they can stay healthy. That's better than what Patrick Mahomes has. That's better than what Josh Allen has. It's better than what anyone has. Those are better weapons than Joe Montana ever had. Those are better weapons than Steve Young or Jeff Garcia or Colin Kaepernick ever had. Again, Jerry Rice. Again, can you put a value on Jerry Rice? You can't, but I'm talking about not just quality but quantity of weapons and the versatility, and you have all that you can do with Deebo Samuel, all you can do with McCaffrey. You have options. So I'm not going to try to pick what's going to happen with the rest of the schedule. They have many winnable games here, and they have games that looked hard that now things have changed. I mean, a lot of things have changed with teams. The Buccaneers are very beatable. Everyone in the division is beatable. That the Packers, they may not even make the playoffs. The Cowboys, let's see the Cowboys win a meaningful game in the playoffs. Remind me when that's happened again? Oh yeah, 1995. All the attention about the Cowboys, and they have not won a big playoff game since 1995. That's a whole nother story to get into. But let's go player by player and look at these positions and how they've done. Jimmy Garoppolo in the first half. He's been inconsistent. He's had one absolutely terrible game. against the Broncos, and he's had some good games. I'd say it's what you'd expect at this point, Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not surprised one way or another. He is what he is at this point, and some have argued saying, what do you mean Jimmy Garoppolo can't get any better? I have not seen him improve over the course of all these years he's been quarterback. Running backs, they just decided to trade Jeff Wilson, which I don't like. I know they're trying to probably recoup some draft picks for all that they gave up for McCaffrey, but I like Jeff Wilson. And Elijah Mitchell and McCaffrey are both injury prone. They've got the young running backs that I both like, Mason and Price. Use them. They're powerful, they're athletic, they have speed. But can you count on them at the end of the season? I don't know. I would have loved a three-headed running attack of McCaffrey, Mitchell, and Wilson. The running backs, though, are a good group as long as they can stay healthy. McCaffrey and Wilson are both dynamic, explosive runners. I mean, McCaffrey more than Mitchell. But Mitchell is really a great carrier. He's got good vision, and he's really smooth. Offensive line, they've been all right. Even the young guys, they've had some growing pains, but I have to say, overall, they've been okay. I think Trent Williams is healthy again, and you got the best left tackle in football. Receivers and tight ends, this is where I get most frustrated, because I feel that they're underused. I do not want to see Deebo Samuel running the ball 5+ times a game. If it's once or twice, okay. But get him out, throw the screens, get him down the field a little more, because we know he can't be tackled. And he owns Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey has never been able to stop Deebo Samuel. Maybe they limited him in the championship game last year, but for the most part, Jalen Ramsey can't stop Deebo Samuel. But a little quieter. Not as good as he was last year, but could you expect him to? I just don't want to see him be put in danger as much out there. Brandon Ayuk is a very good number 2. CeeDee Lamb gets so much attention because he's a Cowboy. Ayuk has put up almost the same numbers as CeeDee Lamb, but no one even knows him other than that hurdle that he did in his rookie season. But Brandon Ayuk is very good. George Kittle's just underutilized. I'm so tired of just seeing him be used as an extra offensive lineman when he is he's the best tight end after the catch. He doesn't have the best hands. You won't get any argument out of me that Travis Kelce is the best receiving tight end, but after the catch, there's no one better, and Kittle's faster too. Use him more, and I think they're starting to, but continue to use George Kittle more. Kyle Juszczyk in some ways is like a second tight end. He can do everything. He can block, he can pass block, he can run block, he can run the football. You can use him as an additional tight end as a receiver. He's the best fullback the 49ers have ever had. And they've had some good fullbacks over the years. Very good fullbacks. But he's the best. On the defensive side of the ball, at the start of the season, it looked like they may have had the best defense in the league. But, let's step back and say they've played some bad teams. They've had some very significant injuries. And they've had guys miss most of the season so far. I think it is still a very good defense, and it has the potential to be the best defense in the league. And I think it all starts with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa was one of those players where the moment he stepped on the field, he was already one of the best defensive players in football in his first game. Week 1, game 1 of his career, he was already one of the best defensive players in football. he changed everything. He's what elevated the team to be a championship level team, at least on defense. He's been very good this year. He was great in his rookie season. Of course, he lost his second season to ACL. The third season, he was even better than his rookie year. I don't think he's been quite as good this year, even though he's on pace to have 16 or 17 sacks, which is a career high, and he's even missed a game. I just haven't seen that constant pressure from Bosa that we saw in the other 2 years. He's still been outstanding. He's still the best player on the defense, arguably the best player on the whole team. But I don't think since he's come back from that injury, maybe he's not 100%. He just hasn't quite been to that elite level that we expect him to be. And he started off great with just how many quarterback pressures he's had. But he's just not been quite as effective. But I'd still give him an A minus for the season. Arik Armstead, unfortunately, he's been out so much and he's been very durable. They have missed him some. I think they've missed him in the run game more than anything. And putting him and Bosa next to each other is a great combination. Javon Kinlaw, what can you say? I don't expect him to be on the field anymore. I just don't expect anything. Samson Ebukam is very underrated guy, and he's a converted outside linebacker. Remember that, and he picked up the new position last year, and this year he's continues to get even better. He's been a very good complement to Bosa. Drake Jackson, who was their top pick, a second-round pick, he's been all right. He's been all right. He's had some moments, but he's raw. You can see the potential. Linebackers, Fred Warner's been a little up and down. I think overall he's certainly been better than he was last year, but he hasn't got back to that level he was in 2020, where he was without a doubt the best off-ball linebacker in football. But I do like that they are using him more as a blitzer and as a pass rusher. He has 1.5 sacks. But I like seeing that. He's as good as it gets in coverage. He's a fantastic tackler. But he's had a game or two here that has not been good. I'd say overall, probably the second best defender. Overall, he's been the best linebacker. And Dre Greenlaw has been very good too. He's underrated. Overall, very good season for Fred Warner. I won't say anything else about the other linebackers. Charvarius Ward has been one of the best free agent pickups that the 49ers have had in a long time. I know it's just half a season, but cornerback has been a weakness of the 49ers since Deion Sanders left. I mean that. It has always been the problem for the 49ers in playoff games and on the big stage. They've had average cornerbacks at best. Ward is a legitimate number one. I'm not saying he's Deion Sanders. I'm not saying he's Revis or Woodson or Richard Sherman in his prime. But he is definitely a legitimate number one cornerback. He had a terrible game against the Chiefs, which was sad, and that whole game was supposed to be the revenge game, and it turned out to be an embarrassment. I won't say anything more about that, but outside that game, he's as good as you could have hoped for him to be. Fortunately, they lost Mosley for the season, but the safeties have been very good. They have Jimmy Ward back. He was hurt. Gibson, the free agent, has been very good too. He was an excellent pickup after Jimmy Ward got hurt. And Hufanga. I mean, I'd say the three best. They've had 4 guys who've played it. Maybe I could argue 5 guys who have played superb football. Bosa, Warner, for the most part, Dre Greenlaw, Ward, and then Hufanga, who leads the team in interceptions, just flying all around there. And I know everyone makes the comparisons to Polamalu. It's hard not to. But it hasn't just been that he's at the line of scrimmage. He's making interceptions. I mean, he's making plays all over the field. It's been a little more quiet the last game or two. However, his impact has been felt, and he's on the path of having a Pro Bowl season. I didn't think he could probably play much coverage, but it's been a pleasant surprise. Really, the only bad play I can think of was he made the mistake on the blown coverage in week 1, that Dante Pettis play. But outside of that, he's made plays in the box. He's delivered big hits. He's caused interceptions. He's made interceptions. Very impressed by his play, and better, just exceeded my expectations. And then finally, let's get to coaching. Kyle Shanahan, sometimes we don't know who to blame, him or Jimmy Garoppolo. In some ways, unfortunately, it's like a bad marriage that they're stuck together. He's too conservative for my liking. And that's usually the problem. And that's why the Rams game was such a pleasant surprise. It's one of the only times I can remember him just saying, okay, we're going to keep our foot on the pedal, and we're just going to keep going, and we're going to put this game out of reach, and we're going to have this game. This game's going to be over halfway through the fourth quarter, and there's not going to be any drama. If he coached like that, then great. And I hope he continues to, but I am very critical of his play calling. So conservative, and we've noticed that he's very good at the start of games. When they have scripted plays, they almost always get off to a fairly good start in home games, road games, and in the second half of the game. Usually that first possession, they're also pretty good too, because they come out with scripted plays again. Second half adjustments has been a weakness. They were just kind of slow to react. I feel like the excuses are gone, though, for Shanahan. Even though he's got to a Super Bowl and another championship game, they have to at least make the playoffs this year. And I think they should win the division, because he still has, even with the injuries, among the very most talented and deepest rosters in the game. So no predictions for the second half. That's my review. We'll see and plan to come back at the end of the season, go through the rest of the games, and hopefully we're talking about playoffs. I don't think they're going to the championship game, most likely. I don't expect the Super Bowl. I never did. What's most disappointing about this season, I'll say it at this point, is in some ways I feel like it's a lost season, because you know you can only go so far with Garoppolo. Are you going to win a Super Bowl against Mahomes or Josh Allen with Garoppolo? No, you're not. So in some ways, I feel like though they had McCaffrey, they're at McCaffrey, and there's some different pieces. In some ways, they may have the best all-around team they have. It's still not good enough, and it's like watching a replay of something we've already seen before.